Hello, and in this video I'm building a countryside train crossing. Now this is very heavily inspired by a UK train crossing, or maybe a very rural Scottish train crossing, because there's no barriers. All that you have to warn yourself that a train is coming is that there is a sign which has two flashing lights that say when a train is coming you must stop, and there's no barrier between you and the tracks. So I wanted to try something a little different, I suppose. Not really too much different. It's just a very small build, much smaller than my normal junctions or intersections. Very, very small. I don't know. It's more like a train track. Like someone has a train track in their basement or their loft, and it's like model trains basically. This is sort of based after that because I saw a YouTube video where someone made a train crossing. I believe it was a rural, like Australian train crossing, but it looked very interesting, just the general layout of it. So I wanted to sort of copy it, but then not really make Australian because I don't have the assets and I don't really make Australian things. I might give that a go in the future, but since I've only ever been to Australia once, I'm not really sure how good I would be at that, but we'll see. Maybe in the future. So like I was saying, this is more of like a model. Like, it still works as the build it is, but I like to think of it as, I guess, a diorama or a very detailed model of a train junction. So getting into a little bit of what's going on here in the video, I'm just trying to create the part where the dirt roads attach to the main, I guess it would be called an A road in Britain. They're not actually attached in the game sense, they're just there so I have a basis to place decals and props on them. Because you can do this thing with roads where you can obviously move the terrain more and willing of what you want to do. Roads are very useful for that. They're very useful to make sharp edges in the game or slight curves that the terrain in the actual game cannot do, because you can move the roads around more, and when you move the roads you move the terrain, and it's just so much better. So right there I was trying to work out what decal I was going to put on the road. I was originally using Sparks Countryside Roads because he makes some amazing UK or British stuff. But I don't know, for me it looks really weird, the decal. Maybe it's my theme, maybe it's my LUT, I'm not sure. It just looked very strange. So I went with Ronix's decals, which are just normal road decals. The only thing I don't like about Ronix's decals are there's way too many puddles in the big stretches. So I try and use that as little as I can, but it's just a bit, I don't know, they're a bit weird when there's such massive puddles all the time, because you don't normally see that unless it has rained within the last, I don't know, 6 hours. Other than that you would not see the puddles because the water would sink into the ground table. So I also changed the A road and I turn it into a small 2-lane with pavement on either side instead of quite a bigger 2-way highway road. Now I did this because the highway just didn't feel right. It felt too big. But this one feels a tiny bit too small, but also it has pavements. So what I do is I either place bushes right up against the road so they're pretty much overlapping, or remove the pavement with the surface painter tool. So with this Land Rover I placed on this hill, I obviously turned it into a procedural object and then sloped the Land Rover so it's more closely followed the terrain it was sitting on. Being something sort of new that I was trying to do, sort of incorporate different heights into the this build, I decided to detail this small area here because I'm using these rocks that I don't use very often. I just wanted to see if it was worth detailing the rest of the area, because I wouldn't want to spend all this time on something that just ends up looking strange or weird. So that's why I did a bit of the early foliage at the start, where I usually do it at the end of the build. So I used a lot of the grass props by Padelmo. They're very nice. They do have a bit of a weird LUT. They change colour a bit too much. I'm not sure if that's just my game or if that's just the LUT of the plant's grass itself. But you don't really see it because I don't really zoom out far enough. So they're okay, but they do have a very strange LUT change in colour, which I'm not sure why. Because a lot of his other things, well, basically all of his other trees, bushes are amazing, just next level. I mean, maybe they're not Padelmo, but I think they are. If you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So here I am trying to work out what I'm going to put on the crossing. And as I said at the start, I use, instead of barriers, I actually use just a sign that displays flashing lights when the train is coming. Now the sign I used was a bit big. I'm not sure why it's so big. Maybe that it is that size in real life, but I felt like it was too big, so I scaled it down with procedural objects. Which, honestly, procedural objects, like I said when it originally came out, has changed the game in so many ways, but it just seems now that people are using procedural objects for literally everything. Such as on the City Skylines Creators Discord, which you should join, the link is in the description. People have been using procedural objects to no end. Just everybody is on the procedural objects hype train, even though the mod is difficult and a bit of a pain to work with. It's still amazing in so many ways. So on the train track, since there's no barriers, I decided to add a yellow box junction. Now, a yellow box junction, like I've said many times before, is a junction that you must not enter unless it is clear for you to exit the junction. So I do it the same way as I did in my previous UK build, where I drew around a square prop I had and then just move them into place to get the perfect box junction, because I always find I place them weirdly when I'm doing it by freehand. So on the other side of the train tracks, I decided to make a little stop-off area, a place you can rest. It's got a couple of bins, maybe there are a couple of walking trails around, and it's just a place to park up and maybe go for a walk, maybe have a rest after driving on the very small, very tiring, boring A roads that are around the UK. So I do the same thing with this van. I turn it into a procedural object and make it follow the terrain more, because it would have looked a bit strange sitting half in the terrain. Obviously, before procedural objects, I would have just moved it off the hill. But since we've got procedural objects, I may as well use them. And if I turn this prop into a procedural object, it doesn't count as a prop anymore, which is lovely. So as you can see, I also added a police car by the side of the stop-off road, just to add a bit of detail, and also a fallen over / broken sign. I imagine someone hit the sign and then moved it into this little lay-by just to keep it out of the way. Put a bit of growth around it just to say it's been there for a little while. Bit of shrubs by the fence as well, just to get that sort of unkept feel for this area. Add a little policeman prop next to the car. Doesn't obviously do much, but it's just there to add something to the scene, really. That's all. So on the other side here, I am trying to find a decent wall to go here. Now Sparks released an amazing wall, asset that is very high tries, and it even says in the description of the mod and on the thumbnail of the mod, it's extremely high tries, and it's just like a very nice stone wall that you would see in rural parts of the UK. And I place it down on the other side, sort of farm, looks like a fence in that farm area, basically. So on the edges of these roads, I did feel it was way too open, and the simple shrubs, I guess, I was going to put on the sides didn't really fit what I wanted to go with. So I ended up using these hedges by Padelmo as well, and I found they were a bit square and regular, as if they were like in a manicured garden. So what I end up doing is adding a shrubbery over the top of the hedge, just to make it look more unkept and more as it's coming over the road, basically. Also make a little procedural object gate here with procedural objects. It's very nice. I'm going to have to do this more because there aren't very many gate props, or at least I don't have very many. So this is quite a nice way to make a gate from this just chain link fence. So there's not much more of this video left. I'm going to leave it, finish the time lapse, and there's a couple more cinematics at the end. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.